Good morning. I am recording this video for Unit 7. Um, at the end of class, I always re-record this video if I can, so we can talk about some things that happened specifically in this class and some things that I've noticed along the way. So this is putting it all together. I just wanted to really quickly review what our goals were in this class. And so I'm sharing my screen just to do a course recap with you real quick. So the purpose of this course, and I hope what you have gained from your time together and what you'll be doing as we finish up here, is to allow you to develop information literacy skills that are just really important no matter what field you're going in. Several of you are going on to grad school in this course. Some of you are already working in the field that you plan to be working in and have already found some ways that this has been useful. But that's really what this is for. I want this to be practical, no matter what direction you're going in. I think it's really important for all of us as citizens that we are comfortable with accessing information and with evaluating information and then using that. And we're going to do that this week, using that to help us make better decisions about things. And so I want us to make informed, data-based, evidence-based decisions. And so we learned about how to assess our own information needs. You guys did that in week 1. We looked at search strategies for locating and retrieving information. We worked on that weeks 2 through 4. And then on into 5 as you were looking for sources. We did a lot of work in week 2 on evaluating sources for credibility. And y'all, I could go on about that for a long time and show you lots of helpful things that will help you navigate the information landscape that we currently are in. We explored a variety of information sources. So I had you look in a lot of different places because I'm a realist and I know that when you leave ETBU, that you are not going to have the same level of access to the scholarly information that we have because we're a university library. And so it was important to me, and it always has been for this course, that you, number one, know that things are out there because you will, although you will not have the same level of access that you do to a university library as you do right now, there's almost always one nearby somewhere. And if you stay in the state of Texas and you participate in the TechShare card program, your public library can give you a TechShare card that would give you lending access at most of the public and many of the private universities here in Texas. And so most public universities also designate a few research computers for the public to use. And so you can go there. A lot of us live in rural areas, and so it's not easy for us to get to it. So I'm just saying it'll be different than what you're used to now. And so if you wanted, a lot of you said, public libraries don't have JSTOR, and that's really probably the case in most places that a public library would not have JSTOR. Your 2 options there would be to purchase access to JSTOR, kind of like an annual subscription, like you would with Amazon or Netflix or something like that. It's not super pricey. Or if you live near a university, they'll probably have access to it. JSTOR, in comparison to other databases that public libraries are able to subscribe to, JSTOR probably costs 4 times more than a typical database would cost just because of the amount of content that's in it. And so it's usually out of the reach and out of the research needs of the general public. And so that's just a FYI there. We this week have looked at best practices for ethical information use. And so that's a thing that most people in this area who get into kind of ethical issues with copying something you're not supposed to copy, or well, that's mainly what it is, reproducing something or accessing something that you don't have legal access to. Most people get into that situation because sometimes it's harder to follow what copyright wants us to do. And sometimes it's because it's for lack of knowledge. And so I always try to make sure that people are aware. Intellectual property is kind of the big umbrella that all information ethical practices fall under. And so that's why we talked about that in this class, as well as copyright and plagiarism, because they're all sort of the same they're different sides of the same issue. And so in week 7, we're seeing all of this culminate into you having a moment where you can pull all of the information that you found together, and you are going to share what you've learned from the information that you gathered with us to help you answer your research question. And so our learning outcomes are here. You can see those in the syllabus. We've talked about those this week. But these are more of the directions that we were going with this particular class. So the ACRL framework for information literacy in higher education. So these are the things, I talked about them, I think the first week, but these are the things that as a college educated person who is information literate, these are the threshold, the foundational concepts that you need to have a good grasp of to be considered someone who is information literate. And so scholarship is as a conversation. So there's this whole scholarly communication conversation going on out there in the world about the things that we research. And so engaging in those conversations. In our position as undergraduate students, we're mostly listening to what the experts have said. But for those of you who are going on to graduate school and going to do master's level or PhD level research, at some point you become the person who is discovering the new things and sharing those with the world. And so it's this conversation that goes on at different levels and at different times. But it's important to realize that that is going on. I have encountered students who just didn't realize that was a thing. Authority is constructed and contextual. This goes to our evaluating information. Just figuring out who is a recognized authority, who do we trust, and different ones of us have different, we all bring our perspective to it, and we're all biased in some way, shape, or form. And so most of the time it's just recognizing that and making informed decisions about what information we are choosing to share, that we are using to build our own opinions on, and making sure that we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we are sharing the truth. As followers of Christ, we are people of the truth. And so we just want to make sure that to the best of our abilities that we are being cautious and careful and responsible with information. Information creation as a process. So there's a process that goes on when we're creating information, and it's important to understand how information gets to us. So that's everything from, where did that random meme come from online to, is this journal peer reviewed, and, are the authors experts in this field? It's all kind of tied up in that together. This week, you learned more about information from a copyright, information has value sort of perspective. A lot of work goes into creating information. And so we want to, whatever context we're in, we want to make sure at the very least that we are giving credit where credit is due. One of you this week talked about how that kind of works on the athletic field too, but that it's important to cite our sources, and it's important to do that correctly so that we are providing a pathway for people to get back to the original source. It's also important to observe copyright rules. We do have some freedom in education under fair use to do some things that are different than what they'll be when you get out into public life. But just to observe those intellectual property rules that we as a society agree on legally and otherwise. It's really about respect. It's really about honoring that creation process that goes on, and it's about proliferating information and making sure that we are able to see what happened in that conversation and to give credit where credit is due. Research is inquiry. So this was when you really spent time in the first couple of weeks of thinking about what is the question that I have. A lot of times I see students come to this with just a general topic, which is not a bad place to start, but it can be really hard to ask a good question if we can't kind of put some boundaries around that question and narrow it down a little bit. And some of you found that as you were researching, and it always happens that way. A lot of times I start with a really big question and then discover as I'm reading, my actual question is much more narrow, and typically, when I encounter students, they still have questions that are too broad. It's usually not that they're too narrow. Every once in a while they're too narrow, but mostly it's that they're way too broad. And then searching is a strategic exploration. So once we have our inquiry, once we have our research, we want to use some effective search strategies to really use whatever resource it is that we're searching to make sure that we're in control of the search results that it gives back. One of the things that's kind of a double-edged sword for me when I watch people search, Google and other search engines like it have made it really easy. They have on purpose worked to make sure that searching in their search engine is really easy and really intuitive and feels like you get what you want at the beginning. And I'm a Google user. Sometimes I'll get worried about privacy and use something else for a little while, but I mean, at the end of the day, I will admit that I use it a lot of times just for convenience. And it does do a pretty good job because of some of the algorithms that are running behind that. But those strategic explorations that you can do, especially in a database that works a little differently than a typical search engine, that will really help you. To me, it's important to feel like I'm in control of what it's showing me. And when you hear about people being frustrated that one person's Google search results, the first page looks different than someone else's because of the history, the browsing history that they have, and how Google only shows you things that it thinks you want to see. You want to have some control over that. There are ways to use advanced search techniques to override what the algorithm is doing. And there's lots of different places and different kinds of search engines to use for that. In a database, it's important to know what those are so you can make sure that you're getting the best results possible. All right. Okay, so let's look at your major project. It says 3, but it's 2. I'm not sure why it says 3. So this is the rubric that we're using, and I will show you over in your Canvas before I stop this video. I will show you where to find this information again. But this is how, if you want to know how I'm going to grade this, this is how I'm going to grade it. And so if you want to pay attention to these kind of things as you're going, that would probably be a good idea. So your criteria over here on the left, I'm going to kind of break them down. Different things have different levels of value. So your research question, and I know some of you, this has evolved a bit since you started searching. That's totally fine. I just want you to clearly state it so that your audience, we're going to review each other's presentations. And so I want it clear enough that at the beginning of your presentation, we all know what your question was and give us some context or background to help us understand the reason for your question. You guys did that in week 2. You've already done this part. I just need it explained at the beginning of your presentation. So if you do that well, if you have a research question and is clear and well developed, it's going to get you 20 points. If it is clearly stated, but it's still kind of all over the place, you're going to lose some points. If it is not clear or it's vague or not stated at all, then we get down there on the other end of the points. And again, if your research question has evolved since we all looked at it in week 1, then just make sure that you acknowledge that in some way. You don't have to spend a lot of time. This is a brief presentation, but I do want we won't understand what your presentation is if we don't have this piece. All right. Your proposal, some of you will have a recommendation. Some of you will have an answer to a question. Some of you are trying to solve a problem. In that case, you're proposing a solution to the problem. If it's more like finding an answer to an issue, it's going to look more like a well-researched answer or a recommendation. So you've posed a question. Your main job, or one of your main jobs here, is to tell us based on what the evidence says. So here's the thing that I see that gets really confusing. Sometimes I will see students who look up all of this information, and then the thing they propose or the solution or the answer has nothing to do with the evidence. The whole point is that we are using evidence to make informed decisions. So if there's not a clear tie between the research and the proposed solution, you will not earn full credit on this portion of the rubric. So you want to make sure that there is a clear tie, that connections are made from the information that you are sharing with us. Okay, so sources, if you did well, and I'm working on getting your record things back, but your sources, most of what I'm seeing is you were able to find highly credible sources. You're going to earn full credit if they are highly credible and relevant information sources. So if you did a good job finding sources in week 5, you should be fine. Presentation. So this is not worth as much of as much points. I do have a general expectation. If we can't watch it, then obviously I can't grade it. And so you're not going to get the other points if I can't make sense of it. But this is really more about how easy it is to look at your presentation. We don't want to be reading an entire paper in presentation form. So make your bullets clear and easy. I would say don't use a ton of text on the page. You can highlight things, but we don't want to hear you. I don't want to sit and listen to you read a presentation. And so if you need help on that, there are tips in Canvas for crafting an effective presentation. Your voiceover. So this is really important. For one, if I can't hear your voiceover, at least half of what you're explaining is probably going to come through your voice on this particular presentation if you are following good presentation mechanics. And so if I can't hear your voice, I'm probably not going to be able to give you an accurate grade on the 20-point sections because I doubt that it's all going to be represented that way. And so your voiceover is really important for that. But just make sure it's clear and easily understood. You can record your PowerPoint just like I am right now with Zoom and just have a meeting with yourself and record it. That is totally fine. There are lots of resources in Canvas on how to record a video, how to do a voiceover on PowerPoint. You can do it with or without a webcam, although research does say that people like to see your face. But that's another option for you there. Not option, important part of the rubric. Ethical use of information. I really just want to see you citing your sources. I want to see the source. If you write it in your PowerPoint and it came from a source, I want you to use an APA or other style. I'm open to MLA or Turabian as long as you do it correctly. It says APA here. I'm not going to take off if it's not an APA format. If it's an MLA or Turabian, that's fine. Most of you did APA. I frankly think it's the easiest one. All sources are accurately documented in the desired format. So you should have 2 places. You should have a reference slide at the end of your presentation that lists all the sources that you use, just like you would at the end of the paper. Make sure they're in alphabetical order. You should also have in-text citations. So the parentheses that you write at the end of the sentence that you're writing, just like you would in a paper, it should also be cited throughout your presentation. If you don't do this correctly, you could lose up to 15 points. So if you don't do this piece correctly, number one, I can't give you credit for your sources if I don't know what they were. So you're probably going to lose points on sources. But if you aren't ethically citing them, which means we give credit when we say it and we give credit at the end so that we can actually go find, we give the address at the end, basically. We give credit as we're saying the information. We provide the addresses to those sources at the end in your bibliography. Those 2 things, if you're not doing that, then you are going to lose points. I care about formatting citations, but I care more about the fact that you are doing your due diligence to ethically say, this is where I got this from, and then help us get to it. Then I care about whether or not you put a comma in the right place in your citation. I may make a note, you may lose a point or 2. I do want you to try to get it right. I'm going to make a note because I would be a bad teacher if I didn't point out, hey, if you do this in another class, you're going to lose points on these APA citations. But for our purposes, it's really about, I'm not teaching a citation formatting class. I'm teaching a class about ethically, that in this portion talks about using information ethically. Mechanics, we're professionals. So as best we can, we want to make sure that there's no grammatical, spelling, or punctuation errors. If you have a few little things, you're going to lose some points here. The last portion, I think my date is wrong here in this presentation. So there's an example of a wrong date. The last portion of this assignment is going to include a peer review. It's worth 10 points. I want you to score this with the rubric and comment on at least 2 classmate presentations. I will give more details about this in Canvas. Canvas is automatically going to assign to you, and it's going to randomly do that. Seniors, we may have to look at a different timeline for you because I've got to get your grades in. So I'm going to look at that this week and send you an email about how peer reviews will work. But that is worth 10 points because I want us to watch at least, I want you to have a chance to see at least 2 other presentations, give them, evaluate them with this same rubric. I'm not going to use your rubric to determine their grade. I'm going to grade it independently. I just would like for them to get some feedback from someone other than me. And so you've all been through this class. You have the rubric. You know what we're looking for. You've learned the same things that I'm using to grade this. And so I'd like for you to have a chance to provide some feedback. But again, your evaluation will not be used in grading your classmates' presentation. This is just an opportunity for us to learn from each other and to give feedback. You may point out something to your classmate that I overlook, or you may explain it in a way that is more clear to them than something I would say. And so this is really a group effort sort of class. And so I want to give you that opportunity. So 10 points of your final is going to be whether or not you complete that peer review, which that's a letter grade. So I really want you to provide some feedback there and make sure that you are giving meaningful feedback. So feedback in this case, a lot of you like to give feedback of like, great, I learned so much, thanks. That's not feedback. That's a compliment. It's not feedback. So feedback in this case would be, hey, I really liked what you did with such and such source, or what questions do you still have? Do you still have a question for them that they could answer? Do you have a suggestion for future research? Do you have a comment to make about something you think they overlooked? Or how clear was their research question? And do you still think they could make that clearer? Those kinds of things are meaningful feedback. Just saying thanks for sharing is not going to get you points here in the same way that giving meaningful feedback will be. So if you have questions, that's what I have for today. I'm going to stop my presentation so that I can go over and show you and I'll get in student view so it looks the same for you. So in your Unit 7 assignment, I'm saying coworkers, but you all know if you're not in a work situation with the question that you're asking, we're sort of pretending. And so you can cater that to your needs. Prepare a 3-minute recorded PowerPoint presentation with a voiceover. Again, there are suggestions on how to do this. Because we're all using Zoom right now, I find Zoom to be the easiest way to record a video. You're going to state your research question, propose an answer solution, and support your proposal with credible information sources that you use in your annotated bibliography. It's all connected. Here's the rubric that I just went over. This is how we're going to grade this. When you click start the assignment, you can, I would not recommend using a webcam. I'm probably going to limit this to just an MP4. Yeah, it's not limited. I'm going to go in and limit this. If someone needs to be able to upload it from a URL for some reason, let's talk about that. If you have a question about doing that, the easiest thing we'll do will be to upload it as an MP4 as a recorded PowerPoint, but I'll make sure that I allow some options there in case we need a few different file formats. MP4 will be the thing that's easiest for everybody to do. So I'll make some adjustments there and include that in the email that I send out to you as we get ready. So that's week 7. Thank you for hanging in there with me this semester. It's always a class that we adjust as we go to some extent because everybody's doing something different. I hope I provided you meaningful feedback this week. I hope, and throughout the course, I hope that if you are ever doing research in the future, that you, number one, have a better handle on where to start and what kind of the foundational concepts will be for that. But I also hope that you are comfortable with talking to a librarian in the future, whether it's me or it's a different librarian. I am, and actually I'm doing the online Texas Library Association conference this week. And so I'm with all of my peers who are talking about how we better serve patrons. So if you have some feedback on, what would be helpful in this course, you've got course evaluations that are up in Canvas. You can certainly fill one of those out, but you can also send that to me in email if you have some suggestions for the class going forward. In your week 7 discussions, you will have a chance to kind of reflect on the past 7 weeks. And so I'm always interested to see what kinds of things you feel like you learned and what you still have questions about that. And I'll use that in the future to make this course even better. So it has been a joy to work with you this semester. Some of you have really just so impressed me this semester with how you were able to apply the things that we worked on in this class. We're not all ending in the same place, but we never do because we didn't start all in the same place. And so some of us already had some research strategies under our belt. And so you're even more confident and sure of what you're doing now. Some of us, we maybe have been doing this, but we weren't sure we were doing it right. And so hopefully I've given you some things that'll help you in your classes in the future. But even after you graduate, it is super important to me that you have the skills you need to be successful in college. I see this as a lifelong learning skill. So hopefully you can take what you've learned here and apply it outside of the classroom and apply it to things in your own life. When you buy your next car or when you have to make a decision about your child's education, like the information is out there. And so just to help you filter through all of that is really my goal with that. So I hope you have a great summer. It's been fun to get to know you. Please stay in touch. And I am your librarian for life if you want me to be. And so in the future, if you have a question, just send me an email. You will be able to find me at each of you. Have a good day.